quick coffee needed. Yeah, I'm hitting the road today. I'm actually going to go meet up with Jasper and Soph, and we're just going to have a nice old day together, hopefully, at a friend's place. So that'll be fun. And I'm going to talk a little bit about EVs and probably charging networks, because would you believe it, the networks still don't work well. I've heard so many stories, mainly on Twitter, and it doesn't seem like the charging experience has improved all that much for people. Well, people that don't drive Teslas at any rate. I think that's the reason why Tesla did it the way they did, because they needed to get a network up and running that their drivers could really use, that wasn't going to detract from the viability of a Tesla. Let's look at the other networks here. They're struggling. I'm sure eventually they'll be fine, but for now, they're struggling. Okay, today I'm also going to be having another go at creating a video that I can edit on my phone, and hopefully this time it'll work better. I'm not going to use Adobe Rush, I'm going to use this other one called, I don't know, Video Maker or something. But, you know, in my initial tests, it seems like a reasonable idea. So it'll probably be a disaster. It better not take me another 2 weeks to edit a video. Drat it, the camera's not quite pointing in the right direction and there's nothing I can do about it while I'm driving along. Anyway, that's an aside. So yeah, I was going to stop on the way because it's a 170-mile round trip. The car was 90% charged, so it had like 205 miles or so in it. And I thought, yeah, that'll be good. I'll stop on the way. That way I won't have to stop on the way back. But I'm running a bit late, so I'm not going to stop on the way there. I am going to stop on the way back. And that's one critical lesson that I've learned over the years of driving electric vehicles. It is always better to stop sooner if you can, because that way, if plans change and you need to not stop, then you can just rearrange things. Whereas if you're already down to sort of, you know, your last few miles and you've got to stop, well, then you've got to stop. Doesn't matter what the EV you're in is, when you get down to, you know, the bottom of the battery, it's charging time. The reason that's a problem is because depending on what EV you're charging with and what charging station you're planning on using, it can be a little, what's the phrase, unreliable. And if you turn up at a charging station and all the bays are full, or the chargers aren't working, you definitely want to have some power in order to get to the next charger. So that is my EV driving charging tips number one for the day. Another tip: if you want to go a decent distance and you don't want to hang out at chargers for too long, try and keep the speed down a little bit, because the faster you go, the increase in efficiency goes up by substantially more. So, you know, you go 70 miles an hour instead of 60, it might only be, well, what is that, about, I don't know, 15% quicker, but it'll probably use 25% more power, that sort of thing. Certainly, if you plough down the road at 80, you will definitely be going through the battery significantly quicker than if you drive at 60. And I'd certainly in the UK, at any rate, it's pretty easy to do 60 because, okay, so the road is sort of clearish right now, but behind me is a sort of lump of traffic and ahead of me is a lump of traffic. So if I was to plough down this road at 80, it would last for about 30 seconds and then I'd be stuck doing 60 again. So I wouldn't really get anywhere that much quicker. But all this speeding up and slowing down, that should be minimised if you want to, you know, drive decent long distances and not have your battery drop like a stone. Yeah. So when I left, it said that if I did the round trip without charging, I'd get home with -2%. Since I've been driving along at somewhere between 60 and 65 most of the way, a large part of that because of roadworks, it's now saying I could get home with 8% on the round trip if I didn't charge. Which isn't good enough for me. I'm definitely going to want to charge. You know, I like to keep my battery above 20% at a minimum. To be fair, I probably didn't have to do an awful lot of sort of conscious effort in order to achieve this efficiency because, like I said, traffic on the motorways in England often precludes the possibility of going much quicker than 60 anyway. So I'm stuck in some pretty bad traffic again. And if you can try and minimise the number of times you actually have to come to a complete stop, then traffic is actually of benefit to your driving range because you're going so much slower. Now, if you have to constantly stop and start like you do at traffic lights in a city, for example, then that advantage goes away and you will lose range rather than gain it from that sort of driving. But it is worth noting that when you're stuck on motorway traffic jams in particular, for the most part, you'll go further than you thought you would, not less far. Another road tripping and EV tip is if you are attempting to go long distances, despite what I said earlier about it's nice to have the flexibility of not having to charge, at the same time, the sooner you can charge, the better, because it gives you all that flexibility. However, there is a sort of an extra bit to that, which is that the more empty your battery is, the faster it will charge from almost any charger. So with my sort of oldish Tesla, it's not going to go super duper quick if I pull in at 10% versus 30%. But if I pull in at 70%, it's not really any speed advantage between just going to any old 40-50 kilowatt fast charger and going to a Tesla supercharger. They will do the same job at the same speed. It is good to turn up with a really low battery in terms of the amount of time you'll spend at the charger in order to put in it a given number of miles. Yeah, and there are a few different little things to think about with EVs. Things that, I mean, it sounds all, way complicated, but it really isn't. It's no more complicated than putting fuel in your petrol tank. It's just that people have to get used to what driving an EV means. Fundamentally what it means is you can't stop for 5 minutes and fix an I'm running out of fuel problem. You'll have to take longer than that. Realistically, 20 to 30 minutes will put in a meaningful amount of range. I'm not loving all this traffic. I'm just going past Heathrow now, and obviously the airport is open because there is tons of traffic on the road. That's one thing I did used to like about lockdown, was not having so many cars to contend with. Oh well. So how do you go about actually finding a charge if you're out and about or whatever? Well, if you're in a Tesla, my first port of call is the navigation screen in the car, because it gives you a live update for what the superchargers are doing, how many of the spots are taken, if there's a queue, if it's full, it'll say that all the spaces are taken. It'll just grayed out with a little sort of clock symbol on it. It's brilliant, and for the most part seems to be a really sort of up-to-date, real-time estimation of what's going on the supercharger network. So that's a really great resource. Now, other EV manufacturers, I'm not actually sure if they have charge maps. I know that my original Nissan Leaf, like 6 years ago, that did have a little charge map in it, which was completely useless, totally pointless. Not a single one of the chargers on there seemed to be accurate, or most of the time even available to the public. It really was a complete and utter mess. But that was a long time ago. The charge maps that come in newer EVs may well be more up to date, although I wouldn't be at all surprised if they're still not. However, ZapMap, that is what I would recommend. It's an app or a website, depending on whether you want to use your phone or not to access it, and it tells you all of the chargers. It's kind of like a social network for EV charging. You can leave little comments, so you can see, for example, right, I want to go to this charger and it says it was working, but it was last checked 2 weeks ago. So you know that's a bit dodgy. Or you can have a look and it says, oh, okay, this one was used this morning successfully and somebody left a comment saying it's great. Well, you can be fairly confident of that charger. You do also get some degree of live update, I believe, in terms of sort of how many of them are in use or not, depending on the network of the charger. And I'm not sure how accurate that is, but certainly if, you know, it's in use, it's a good sign that it's working, which is a plus, because it is amazing to me how many people spend money putting chargers in the ground only to let them stop working and then not make any effort to get them repaired and online again. I don't get that, but I guess it's probably partly because I think a lot of people have put chargers in the ground where the business model they used was basically, let's make money from putting them in the ground and charge the government, or, you know, get income from grant more than from actually selling electricity. So yeah, I suppose that does lead to a lack of incentive to keep the things up and running. But yeah, ZapMap, that is definitely a top tip. It's a great app. It's got every kind of charger you can imagine. You can filter it by all sorts of different things, like, you know, whether you can pay by contactless card or if you need to join a network or whatever. And that kind of information is really important because there are still a lot of chargers out there which you can use only if you've joined the right network and got the right RFID card or app set up on your phone. Definitely helpful to know these things in advance. Yeah, that's one of my pet peeves actually. Turning up at a charger and the charger's working, the car is empty and needs charging, and you can't use it because you can't make the thing work. Ooh. Any more tips? Oh, I think I've probably covered the vast majority of the tips. Make sure your tyres are pumped up to the right sort of pressure. That's always handy if you want to go a decent distance. I mean, that's a good idea in any car, actually, obviously. But in particular in an EV, you know, it can make 5-10% difference, which, you know, when it comes to EVs, certainly the 200 mile, 250 mile EVs, for the most part, every percentage of range that you can get your hands on, you want. You don't want to be wasting them. I mean, I don't drive around with a bike attached to the outside of my car, mainly because I can't. But if I could, I probably still wouldn't most of the time, because the air resistance would just kill the efficiency, and I don't want that.
Estimated time in traffic, 14 minutes.
Yeah. One final tip. If you can, turn your EV up to the highest level of regen that it's got available, and then try and use the regen as little as possible, which I know sounds a bit counterintuitive, but the point is, if you've got to stop, you're much better off using regen rather than physical brakes, because then you will at least recoup, I don't know, about 70% of the kinetic energy in the car, as opposed to physical brakes where obviously you recoup nothing. But at the same time, recouping 70% is nothing like as useful as recouping 100%, which if you were to cruise, you know, sort of slow down just from air resistance and friction and all the rest of it, rather than regen or physical brakes, that kind of slowing down is 100% efficient. You know, every last bit of physical kinetic energy in the vehicle goes into moving it forwards and overcoming friction and air resistance to do that, rather than, you know, charging batteries with the losses involved or heating up brake pads with 100% loss. So yeah, there you go. Full regen, but use it as little as possible. I think that's probably it, you know, for the tips. Other than, if you are using ZapMap to look for somewhere to charge, do make sure that not only can you access the charger via a card or, you know, contactless payment or whatever it is you're using to pay, also make sure you've got the right connector for that, you know, for that quick charger. There's no point turning up at a CHAdeMO and Type 2 charger if you've got an iPace, for example, or an Audi e-tron, because you're going to be stuck using the Type 2 at like 7 kilowatts. It's not going to be a good look at all. So yeah, definitely want to check that. I'm living the dream with this car because I've got a CHAdeMO adapter and a CCS adapter, and I've got the dual chargers on board, so I can charge from more or less anything. Well, except commando sockets, because I don't have my UMC with me. I actually use the UMC back at home as my home charging unit, and so far it's been doing that job very well for the last few years. Right, I'm almost there now, so I'll see you in a bit. I think the sunglasses might be a bit presumptuous today. We've come out to a local park shortly. I just discovered this charger here, and I've just used a website to sign up to it, and it seems to be charging. I'm hoping... Yeah. What? 3.1 kilowatts? Oh, come on, 7 please. Charging. Still a long ways to go, but you know, I mean, if we're here for a few hours, maybe that means I won't have to stop on the way home. At 7 kilowatts it would mean that.
4.6.
Oh, it is going up, is it?
7.
Yay!
It's at 7 now.
Yes! I guess my railing on charging networks maybe wasn't quite fair. Although I've never heard of this one before. Now. What's it called? Hubster. Hubster. Had to sort of mess around with an app and putting in a payment for like 10 minutes. We better get going. Oh, there we go. Okay. How are we doing? Yeah, we're getting there. Okay, need to get this disconnected now. This has been extremely helpful to me. All right, let's just get this put away. Thank you. Now I've got my fresh cup of, I'm spilling my fresh cup of tea. Drop it. No. Time to go home with, okay, not fully charged, but charged enough. Well, this has been a fun day. Really enjoyed it. I hope you guys have found the vlog post interesting and fun, and with any luck you found some of the tips useful as well. If you're not already an EV driver, I would imagine that most people that drive an EV are probably already aware of basically everything that I've already said. I'll just leave you with one little saying, which I think is probably slightly less relevant now than it used to be a few years ago, but you've got the ABC of electric vehicle charging, and that stands for always be charging. So if you can, plug in. Although I would say, as a little caveat to that, perhaps if we're talking about a domestic socket, it might not be worth it. If you're only there for a few hours, domestic sockets are so slow, you're better off just spending an extra minute at the supercharger, unless that couple of hours on a domestic socket means you can get home without charging. But I think for the vast majority of people, domestic sockets, that's probably not the case so much. Certainly any other kind of socket, any kind of high power 7 kilowatt or above socket, always be charging. And I'm home. Oh, it was good fun. Had a good day, enjoyed it. Driving on the way back was much easier than the way there, luckily. So that's handy. I don't like traffic. That's the one thing about this whole pandemic that I've actually not minded too much, is the nice quiet roads. Right, let's get the car plugged in. And that brings my vlog post to a close. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, remember to leave a like and share it, and subscribe if you haven't already. And follow me on Instagram and Patreon if you don't already. Links in the description. And I want to say a massive thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. And I will see you all in tomorrow's vlog, hopefully. Bye.